Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center here at K-State, and you have found our way to our weekly professional development series. As always, we're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement.
Yes, sharing screen and sound. And then Don, if you could just give me a thumbs up whenever you see it. Okay, perfect. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism, and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. For those of you who are joining us in person or watching asynchronously, I want to put on your radar that this series meets every Wednesday, 12 noon in real time over the academic year. We also record all of our events and post them for asynchronous viewing at your convenience on the TLC webpage. We also have lots of other information and resources on the TLC webpage. Our newsletter came out this morning. That is on our webpage as well. I want to point out a couple of interesting things from that. First of all, we're going to be having more events this semester related to AI. Some of that is going to be related to work that Sydney Alexis and Teresa Merritt Cassidy are going to be doing. So you should definitely check that out. For instance, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be back in our series on Wednesday, October 16th, talking about teaching with AI, best practice takeaways for your assignments and class teaching, which I imagine will be very interesting for many of us. And maybe even just to get us ready for that event next Wednesday, Camilla Roberts, who directs our honor and integrity system, will be talking about what we need to know. This is a need to know event about honor and integrity. So definitely do check those events out in the near future. We also have a book series that Suzanne Parath from the College of Education will be leading. Great book, Small Teaching Online. This will be meeting. Information is in our newsletter as well. The first meeting on part 1 of this book will be Friday, October 18th from 1 to 2 p.m. This will happen over Zoom, and there's a link in our newsletter that if you'd like to register for that book club, you can be part of that. And if you're wondering what's in this for me for being part of this PD series, outside of the intrinsic benefit of becoming a better teacher, you can also potentially earn a professional development certificate. And my colleagues have dropped that into the chat, and that information is also available on the website. If you're a faculty member who also wants to be a TLC fellow, we have opportunities for that. So you can check out those opportunities too. Today, I'm really excited because we have what we call a TLC chat. For those of you who've never been to TLC chat before, in some ways, it's kind of like TLC office hours. We kind of open it up for conversations, questions, concerns, issues that people might want to raise and crowdsource the answers to. And I always have some questions that I want to ask people for my own benefit as we kind of talk about. So for now, kind of open this up and say, what are any questions or issues that y'all might have that you want to talk about this week? And hey, Natalie and Brandon, who have joined us in the meantime. And Andy. Andy's here as well. And Faraday. So people are just popping in. They just even to say those magic words and people started to appear. So that's fantastic. I'm excited to see all of you. You missed announcements in the newsletter. Check that out. But I'm kind of opening up the floor for discussion about any issues, comments, or questions y'all might be having.
Can I share a cool ChatGPT thing that I've been experimenting with lately and I'm trying to incorporate into classrooms?
I think you need to now. So Brandon, floor is yours.
So this is dependent upon you having the paid version, the ChatGPT Plus. I think it's like $20 a month. They've rolled out this advanced voice feature. So whether you've got iOS or Android, you go into the ChatGPT app, and there's a button to be able to go into a voice mode. I'm going to do a simple prompt right now where I think which prompt I use. I'm going to do one that's like a customer service prompt. But my point is you can tell it to role play, and you're going to say, this is the role you're going to play. This is what I'm going to play, and engage in this dialogue with me. And so I've been trying to figure out different type of role plays that would be useful in the class setting. Like an obvious one is like interviewing for a job. You could tell it like, hey, I'm interviewing for this specific job. You can even, give it information on that and say, I want you to ask me questions like you're interviewing. And once I tell you the interview is over, give me feedback on what I could do differently. But just the tone, the depth, and the emotion that it can potentially portray are surprising. So here we go. If technical things work here.
Hello, Brandon.
Hello, I would like to have you play a role of a customer who is calling into their internet provider because their internet speeds are nowhere near what they expect. What you don't know is that your Wi-Fi router is a little bit less powerful for your house, and your house is too big, and so you're not getting coverage in kind of the corners of your house. But you don't know that, but you're calling in, you're upset, you're frustrated, and you're really angry and almost combative with me. I'm going to play the operator who's going to try to troubleshoot your issue.
Got it. I'll be the frustrated customer. Let's get started whenever you're ready.
All right. Hello, my name is Brandon with WTC. How can I help you today?
Yeah, hi. I'm really fed up with your service. I'm paying for high-speed internet, but my connection is so slow it's practically unusable. What am I even paying for if I can't get the speeds you promised?
That sounds really frustrating. I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. I can definitely help you with that. Let me ask you some questions to better understand what's going on. Can you tell me like what devices you're working on that you're seeing this slowness?
I'm mainly using my laptop and my phone. Both are slow, especially when I'm in the living room or upstairs. It's ridiculous. I can't even stream a video without it buffering every few minutes. It's like I'm back in the dial-up days or something.
Yeah, that would be frustrating. Let me ask you another question. Can you tell me where in your house you're using these devices, particularly in relation to where your Wi-Fi router is? I have a suspicion that that might be part of the issue.
The router is in the basement, and I'm mostly upstairs or in the living room. But that shouldn't matter. I expect decent speeds throughout the house, not just in the basement. It's 2024 for crying out loud. Shouldn't your equipment be able to handle that?
Well, yeah, you would think that it would cover every single house, but sometimes where it's being placed in the house can be a difference. And the fact that you're saying it's in the basement and a lot of your devices are up on the top floor makes me think that could be the issue. Now, here's something that we can try. We have this mesh router system where we can send you an additional router that you can put upstairs, and it will communicate with your router and downstairs, but will provide a better coverage upstairs. Is that something you'd be willing to try?
A mesh router system, you say? I suppose it's worth a shot, but I'm not paying extra for this. This is your equipment's fault after all. What can you do for me?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, if we did give you this mesh router system, it would be an extra $2,000 a month.
$2,000 a month? That's outrageous. I hope you're joking.
No, I'm totally joking. I'm totally joking. So anyways, like when I started playing with this, I was just really surprised by what this could do, and just starting to plant a seed of how students could potentially use that in a one-on-one dialogue. I got to answer the door real quick.
So $20 a month, and we just made a friend. I mean, that's kind of how that goes. So how many of you all are just terrified about what we just heard?
I am.
Because yeah, I'm going right to Skynet with this, and
I'm part terrified, but also I was talking with Andy about this recently. I am both, I feel rationally as well as irrationally angry with the existence of AI and its uses. And Brandon, I've seen you a lot of these chats and love all the things you have to say, but oh my goodness, this one is something that I'm like, oh man, I don't know about this. I would love to know how you all respond to AI and talk about AI from an emotional standpoint, because it's something that, quite frankly, is this close. It pushes me away from teaching more than just about anything else. And since I'm not teaching full-time anymore, I am, because of AI, I am relieved that I am teaching less because of AI. And I think the use of AI on the impact of people wanting to join the field of education, whether that's college or outside or K-12, people staying in the field, burnout, additional things. I see so many negative impacts. I wouldn't even consider being a high school teacher because of AI. I would rule it out, and I'm probably not alone. And there's probably also people who are super equally excited about it. So Brandon, not a personal attack at all. And like I said, partly rational and partly irrational, my response. So I'm just curious for all of you, how does AI impact your cortisol levels and your stress, and how do you manage that? Because I think it can be a real big deal in that way, and not always such a positive one.
I think I have a healthy apprehension of AI. And I have to actually say, were it not for Brandon Savage being, in my professional life, I would hate it more than I do. But Brandon has just he's kind of intrigued me, kind of as we've gone through this, that I'm a lot more open to it in many uses than I was before. I think the biggest issue that I have, because I've played with it a bunch since, we've had some initial conversations, is its product looks pretty good, except for the stuff I know a lot about. So if I'm just asking it for something general, like, hey, that sounds pretty good. That's a pretty good answer to that question. That's a pretty good prompt. But if I ask it something I know the answer to, I'm usually not impressed with the answer. And I'm assuming that's not only me. I'm assuming if someone else was an expert in the question I asked that I thought was good, they would also have similar reservations with the answer that they get. So I think the biggest issue that I have is that we don't always have consumers who are able to critically evaluate what they're given when they get that AI product back from them. One of the things I try to do in my teaching, and I know this is where your question was kind of starting out, Melissa, is I try to ask questions where if they're going to use AI, they might fool me, but they're going to miss out on what the purpose of that assignment actually was. And my assignments are usually pretty personal. So it's a reflection, it's an application, it's your teaching philosophy. It's not AI teaching philosophy. So you might give me something that looks kind of good, but I'm only going to see it as kind of good. And if it's not yours, then you haven't really achieved what the learning in the class is supposed to be. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, and this is, cognitive dissonance kicking in to help me kind of manage the situation, is trying to say, I want to be less police officer and more facilitator. And, kind of tell people, if you use these things, which are not allowed in my class, but I don't admit I can't really catch you if you do, it's going to take away the opportunity to learn what you're paying me to teach you. So I'm trying to kind of rely on those sorts of prompts, but I'm well aware that several of my students might be using AI at some point to complete assignments, and I would never know. So I'm choosing to focus on teaching the best way that I can, giving assignments that not everybody has, the same answer kind of coming back to me, and really just sort of hoping for the best. I'm not trying to be the ostrich with the head in the ground that completely ignores it, but I'm also trying to be realistic about what I can and can't control. That's where I am. And Andy's going to say something more elegant than that. So, Andy.
Highly doubt it, but I was just having this conversation with a colleague yesterday. For one of our Spanish classes, we have a number of assignments. One of the skills that we're developing in the class is reading comprehension and being able to read texts that are a little bit longer, a little bit more complex, and being able to understand that. And so one of the things that we do is that after they read the text is have them write a short summary in Spanish about what the text is about. And this is, I really like this exercise for students because it's a really good indicator of like how much they understand and how well they can express that. But with ChatGPT, a lot of times now they're just taking the text, putting it through AI and saying, summarize this in 150 words. And they come out with this great, and we can tell, because as Don was saying, when it's an area of your expertise, you're able to spot bullshit. And so, excuse me, I shouldn't be, we're recording this. I should keep it a little more profesh. But, you know, so we see this work and it's very clearly not student work, right? Like there are certain types of errors that I expect, certain phrasing that I expect. You know, the way that bilingual learners use the language is different than the way that monolingual speakers use the language. And so there's just all these clues that are very obvious that one has used this type of tool. And so my colleague was asking, like, what do I do in this situation? Like the student obviously has not done their work. This is clearly not produced by the student. And I'm really with Don that I'm like, I really don't want to play police, you know? This is an opportunity that we're giving to the students. If they want to pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time to not really learn the material, like that's just not where I want to focus my attention. Now, so you can submit this to the Office of Integrity, whatever, student integrity, academic integrity.
Honor and integrity system.
Thank you. Thank you. See, I told you I wasn't going to be elegant, elegant and eloquent. Anyway, so it's like, this is absolutely something that you can report, you know, and if that's the route that you want to take, you can. I was like, what I would do and what I have done in those situations is to respond to the student and say, it looks like you got a lot of help with completing this assignment. This is not the level that this is much more sophisticated than I would expect at this level. And when I can't see your errors, I can't give you good feedback. And so, and then I just count the assignment as being done. And, you know, if they cheated, whatever, I just don't care. Like, not that I don't care, but I'm just like, this isn't where I want to put my energy. What I do with that answer is that I indicate to the student, I see you. I know that this isn't your work. The other option that I gave my instructor as something that they could do is to be a little bit firmer on that and say, this is clearly not your work. You know, this is much more sophisticated than I would expect at this level. So either you should be in a higher level and this course isn't right for you, or yeah, I love threatening to put them in higher levels. Or you got too much help. And if I see this type of work again, I'm going to give you a 0 until you meet with me and convince me that this is your work. And so like,
and meanwhile, my next prompt is going to be like, summarize this in Spanish like a first-year Spanish student would do.
I know, exactly. So that's exactly why I don't put a lot of energy into the anti-cheating stuff, right? Because it's like AI is always going to be able to, like, the student's going to say, okay, like, put this, you know, and the students know, like, we're very clear with what the expectations are. So we say, like, in this class, we expect you to be at an intermediate low proficiency level according to the actual proficiency guidelines. And so you can easily put that with AI prompt, summarize this at the level of an intermediate low Spanish speaker, and AI is going to do a phenomenal job. So it's just not a battle that, you know, meanwhile, I have other students who write me and they say like, oh, I'm super engaged with this class. I love it. Like, oh, I'm learning so much. I'm like, that's where I want my attention to be. I want my attention to be continuing to provide quality education opportunities for students who really want to take them, and the students who are there to check the boxes and move on, you know, check the boxes and move on. I just don't have a lot of energy to spend on policing whether or not students are doing their work.
You know, so in the meantime, in the background, I asked ChatGPT, I said, do you help students cheat in their college classes? And ChatGPT has reassured me. It said, I can't help with cheating, but I'm here to assist with studying, understanding concepts, and preparing for exams. See, so we don't have to worry anymore. ChatGPT just assured us they're not helping us with cheating.
Right.
You know, one of the things I think is really cool, though, and this is something that a research project doing with Aaron Johnson in Department of Animal Science, they do pestle analyses of things, and pestle, like all the impacts like something has, so political, economic, social, all the impacts that something has. So they'll do pestle analysis, like if we do this, what are the impacts? So what they're doing is they're actually, in one of their assignments, are having ChatGPT or whatever AI engine they want to use do the pestle report. but then they have to critique the pestle report. So it's kind of a cool thing where they're actually growing their expertise by doing the review or the critique of the newly created AI generated example, which will be different for each student. And not only are they kind of growing those critical thinking skills, they're actually learning the boundaries of where AI is good and bad. So I really think that there's some cool things that we can kind of do with it, but you know, it is a little terrifying too. So what have the rest of y'all done in your classes regarding AI?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
As a graduate student who does about 3 different seminar courses with maybe 4 articles to read for each course, can I use AI to summarize my articles, or am I doing something wrong?
I think the can you is something you might want to ask your instructor. I think that would be a really cool thing to try. To kind of see, you know, for people who have read the article and are kind of expert in that field, does AI do a good job summarizing? My guess is it probably doesn't. My guess is it probably just gives you the abstract back in some capacity. And the reason I say that is I've had people use AI to review their papers. So, you know, we have the peer review process, you know, we want to submit it and reviewers. So I've had some colleagues who put their paper into AI and say, give me the review. I want to kind of anticipate the feedback. And it is superficial. So it's really just you have a correlation in here that might not show causation. You know, it's kind of the stuff that you might get from someone who's taken 2 weeks of a methods course at the sophomore level. So I'm a little bit concerned that it might not give you a better summary than if you were to just read the abstract, maybe the study overview, the first paragraph of the discussion, those sorts of things. But I don't know that for sure. Andy.
I would also say that, you know, I think in a pinch, you know, we all have moments where we're just like, I am like way beyond capacity and I just need like, I need this summarized down into 5 pages instead of 20, right? I think that you could use it. I think that the problem is that you're robbing yourself of that, like your own analytical skill of being able to read and identify what's important, and all of those things that are necessary in doing graduate level work. And so if you're doing that regularly, you're not developing the skills that we expect that graduate students are developing.
And Andy, I love that you had the kind of realistic, pragmatic kind of note in there too, that, you know, sometimes we do what we got to do. Natalie doesn't have a voice today. I'd heard about this. I'm sorry. And apparently you're doing some guest lecturing, even though you have no voice this week. So that's amazing. I'm sorry. But Natalie said, it depends on the course, but for now they have a statement saying if they use it, they need to cite it, and said most of the assignments are done in person or quite unique, so it's less tempting to use it. And that's kind of where I err with my assignments as well. It's, I mean, why would you do this? You're applying it to something, you know, meaningful in your life. Why would you have AI answer that? Natalie goes on to say when she spots its use, she talks to the student about why they choose to use it because they often use it, they have questions, and AI did not help them actually get the clarity they needed. So I really like what, you know, the sentiment that a lot of it is representing our answers here is we're trying to help the students learn. We're not trying to help the students navigate and check the boxes to get the A or the B or whatever grade it is. We're trying to get them to actually achieve the learning objectives in those classes. And AI might actually cheat them out of that. So the cheating might happen in a couple of different ways, and ChatGPT did not acknowledge that, you know, in the answer that they gave to me. My AI policy, by the way, in my classes, because I want to give myself as much flexibility as I can, right? As an instructor, you know, I might 3 weeks into the semester say, you know what, why did I say they couldn't use it? I want to have that. So my policy is you can't use it unless I tell you you can use it. And that's kind of what that is, because I want to have the opportunity later in the semester, if I think of something creative and I want to play, or, you know, I hear Brandon give me a wonderful idea, I want to be able to do that. So my policy is just don't do it unless I tell you you can do it. And so far, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to play police officer. I haven't noticed a big issue in my classes. Rebecca, I see your hand.
Yeah, I am intrigued by Andy's comment, like that we all got into a place in times where we need something fast. And I know that that is true, but I think that that's also important feedback for us to pay attention to. So if we get to a point when we have such excellent hacks, whether it's AI or something else, that we're lightening our input that we have to, the work we have to do, and maximizing the output. I think it kind of gives us maybe a false sense of productivity. So I can imagine like both rising expectations for all of us. Like, I don't want to have to compete with colleagues who are using AI to summarize articles, not reading them, because they're going to get more writing done. They can get through that lit review faster, right? And that person is going to be able to publish more than I can. So I'm concerned about those rising expectations. And then I'm also concerned that we would be missing out important feedback for our own individual lives, that we're doing too much. And so, you know, if I'm running 100 articles through AI and getting summaries out, and I'm just, you know, pushing out publications because of that, it's bad for my colleagues, but maybe it's also not good for me in terms of a pace that's responsible to myself. And I feel like eventually you're going to get caught at it, probably in an embarrassing way at a conference, when somebody asks you a hard question about an article they wrote and you misrepresented. And so I could see it just being like a house of cards come tumbling down. Yeah.
No, I think that what I really like is you kind of talked about, you know, AI for us, because a lot of times we think this is a student issue. It's not just a student issue, right? Like I've told this story before in here, but I'd been to a workshop when, you know, ChatGPT had kind of first come out, and I was sitting next to a professor in our English department, like, oh, this is awful, this is awful. And Philip Marslov was giving the talk. And so he's giving the talk and he said, we're going to do some stuff. He said, AI, write me. And he gave it like an essay prompt, and immediately gave an essay prompt. So the professor sitting next to me freaking out. Oh my God, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. Can't believe this. And then Philip said, all right, provide critical feedback on that essay prompt. And what it did is it provided the critique. The professor next to me was freaking out, saying, wait, we can use this to grade? And, you know, their demeanor completely changed, right? It wasn't like, oh, the students are cheating. It's like, wait, I can use this to make my life easier? So it's not only students who are tempted with these kinds of things. Brandon, your hand up. And by the way, I saw Melissa's hand is up as well, even though we can't see that. So.
Yeah, and I'll share just a few thoughts, and I got to jump because I've got another meeting. But yeah, I'm using it in ways to help with my teaching lessons. I've used it for some grading stuff. I've figured out some other type of assignments that can incorporate in the classroom to teach them how to use it, kind of like what Natalie was saying. I don't want us to fall into the trap of how maybe a bunch of accounting faculty might have felt 25 years ago when Excel came out, and they're like, oh, this is cheating. Like, and there's a tweet I saw today that's on a completely separate topic, but I think it applies to this. It has to do with the longshoremen strike on the East Coast. And this is a quote from the New York Times. In Sweden, if you ask a union leader, are you afraid of new technology? They will answer, no, I'm afraid of old technology, says the Swedish Minister for Employment and Integration. The jobs disappear, and then we train people for new jobs. We won't protect jobs, but we will protect workers. And I think there's a philosophy there, is that as students, what it means to be a student and what the output of a student and what learning and how they're going to be able to function in a new world that's filled with AI may just be different. And maybe some of the things we've thought of absolutely necessary critical skills, maybe those aren't as important anymore. It's writing the prompts that can create the critique. I don't know the answers yet. It's moving way too fast, but it's fun to play around with it and see what it can do and how it can make lives easier.
Nathan.
So we've been dealing with that in our AI and computer science for a long time. And really the big concern is, especially now with the large language models, you can sit down and ask ChatGPT, you can feed it an exact assignment prompt, and it will give you something that will work and run. And one of the ways that we've really tried to counter that is to sit down and actually talk through, what are we learning here? Why do we need these foundational skills? How are they going to be built upon in further courses? And really help lay out to the students that if you want to be a computer scientist, you've got to have this foundational knowledge that you're going to need to be building on top of And if you don't go through the process of, and we get into some cognitive science and some learning theories, and it is just one day lecture that we take up for that, but really setting the stage for why are we doing this? Why is it important? Why do you need to actually do this work? And why does taking the shortcut, what's that going to do to you long term? And you can even do a little bit of a scare tactic. My brother, for example, was in a company where they caught a programmer who didn't know how to program. 2 years had been in industry and had been able to convince other people to do their work for them until finally it just became painfully obvious this person didn't have the skills, and they lost their job and basically have never done a software job again. So if you're coming in and you're looking for that employment opportunity and you really have that goal of, I want to be this when I get out, just helping the students see what their actions are going to lead them there can be very helpful. And the other thing I'll say with the AI, there are really good ways of using it within that context. Like here, take this program, paste it into ChatGPT and explain this program to me. I'm just not getting it. Or can you describe to me what this concept is that I've read the notes and I went to the lecture and I'm still not getting it? So that kind of additional tutoring that especially for our students is on demand at times where they can't get the professor or a TA because our students work all hours of the day and night and have some really weird schedules. It does reasonably well for a lot of that kind of work.
I think those are excellent points. And by the way, something you had said in your story reminded me. So you mentioned how this person was a programmer, but they didn't know how to program because they got other people to do their work. Robert Sternberg, who's one of the preeminent intelligence researchers in psychology, says that there's three kinds of intelligence. There's analytical intelligence, which is basically your ability to process information. There's creative intelligence, which is your ability to create. And then there's practical intelligence. The practical intelligence is basically how to get along. And he argues that if you're going to have one of the three, you want to have practical because you'll get other people to take care of you. So you don't have to know how to do anything. Other people will like you enough that they'll take care of you. So it sounds like that practical intelligence was getting that person through. So I just thought I would kind of note that. But I really liked your kind of your realistic approach to that. Yeah, Gardner's up to 9. He had eliminated a couple. So he eliminated like cooking intelligence as one of his original kind of ones. But I talk about that theory as well in the class. Melissa, you had your hand up and you let me know in the chat.
I can't figure out how to raise a hand in Zoom because apparently it's 2018 in my office today. Farida, and pardon me if I'm not pronouncing your name. First, I want to commend you for asking, is what I'm doing wrong? Because I think that's a brave thing to do in a room full of academics, to say, hey, I use it. Is this wrong? And I think that, so I appreciate you asking. I don't think it's a clear-cut answer either, like our discussion has shown. And honestly, just hearing your question made me think we need, as teachers, to create environments where our classrooms where students can ask us, is this wrong or not, without fear of retribution. I did have a student use an AI clearly to cheat, just didn't write his own work at all. And I had a great conversation with him. And I was 99% certain that's what he did. But I just said, tell me about your writing process. And I ended up telling him, I basically showed him support as a student. This is difficult to navigate. No one here at K-State agrees on this fully. There are people from here to hear about its uses, and it's kind of a disservice to students. You're kind of stuck in this area where there's not clear-cut yes and no about AI. And when I gave him that space, he then responded and said, yeah, but what I did was wrong. And I said, okay, why do you say that? And he said, well, they weren't my thoughts. And so, but he needed kind of that, not empathy for him cheating, but empathy for this being a difficult space to be in, to do that. And then I think that what you're asking about, Farida, is different. I think it can fall, depending on how you're using it, as a study guide or study aid. I'm thinking back to when I first was an English major undergraduate, and I took Intro to Shakespeare, and I could not understand it. And I read and read and read, and I looked at the annotations and everything. And what I ended up doing at the time, what was available was SparkNotes. Did I read the SparkNotes and skip the play? No. But did I read the play and follow along with the Spark Notes, kind of like a tutor next to me? Yes. And so I felt like that was different because I was still trying to do the work on my own. And as I got better, I needed the assistance less because I learned how to interpret. So I gained those skills. So it was an aid for me. So I think, like other people have said, if you're reading scholarly articles and you're needing a quick review of something you've already read, which article was this? Oh, now I remember it. Or here's the main points I got out of it. Am I missing something? What does AI say? Did I understand this correctly? Yes or no? And you can go back and review those points. I think those would be really healthy ways of using it, but you're still gaining those skills of analyzing and understanding those articles that can be really difficult. And I also think just partly hearing you all say, I'm not here to police this. I'm going to do what I can and focus on students. What are you going to get out of this? What are you going to learn? How's this going to help you in your future? That's like lowers my cortisol levels and helps. But I also think when we talk about it, it's a lot of like, can I use AI is almost like saying, can I use Google on this assignment? Well, it depends on how you use it, right? If you're writing a paper and you look up a paper and download it, no, you can't use it in that way. But if you are finding research, then yes, you can use it. So I think it gets really, really complicated. And people don't know how to talk about it yet because it changes every 5 seconds. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is a complicated issue. I think the statement that I had heard that was probably most distressing to me in any of the AA conversations that we had is a graduate student at a workshop I was at made the argument that we shouldn't teach writing anymore because AI can do it for us. And I didn't like that. That's one of those things where I think that's a skill that needs to be, nurtured in undergraduate and our graduate students and our faculty, obviously. But there's a lot of things it can do. Faraday has mentioned a comment in the chat, like you need to simplify work. To the original question that Faraday had asked is, can we use this to give us a summary of articles? And I think as Andy had kind of said, better that than nothing, right? So if you're not going to read the article at all, I'd actually rather, if you were a student coming into my class, you get the AI summary of the article so you could at least have some of that. But I would vastly prefer the student actually read the article. And in that case, I do see that as a little bit of a facilitation of the knowledge acquisition, not so much a replacement of the work. And he said concerns, maybe we're going to start down the road to idiocracy. So yeah,
not teaching writing, that would lead us to
right.
The Idiocracy outcomes, if anyone's familiar with that wonderful film, one of my favorites.
I've even heard faculty say, let students use it to generate the ideas for the paper, and then they write the paper. And so they're still doing the writing. But I also want them to do the thinking, and if I can't see what the student is thinking and how the student is writing, then I'm missing feedback that I need to then adjust my teaching to help them what they do. So that's a reason for me not to use the AI in grading, because I need to know what they've learned. So I need to know what I can go back and teach them again or reinforce or teach in a different way. I haven't heard, I have a lot of concerns about the ethics of AI on the, from the point of, the environmental impact of it, which for me, it looks to be enough of a reason to be cautious about it, and also how it's created. So you might have heard recently that Routledge and Taylor and Francis are both contracting with AI companies to train them using our academic writing. So I think about if the books that I write and the articles that I write are used to train AI, how do I feel about that? I feel a little bit like somebody is making money off my idea. That feels pretty close to plagiarism, actually, right? Like, I know they're not presenting it as their ideas, but eventually they are. So how this affects creators, whether it's writers or artists. So for my students, I say no, and have pushed towards in-class writing and service learning projects, and away from discussion boards for some things. And I now have I'm teaching an online class right now, and my students have to meet with a small group of their classmates online. So they're practicing technology skills, but they have to have a real conversation that they record and submit to class. rather than a discussion board. And I've done it for a couple of semesters now. And consistently students tell me at the start that they're really scared to do it, and then that they love doing it. And they usually have made a new friend. And sometimes they come back to me and say, oh, it turns out this girl lives in my dorm. Can we just meet in person? Because we're having so much fun. And I say, no, because I have to see it. I want to make sure you actually had a real conversation. And so it has kind of pushed me back to some things like handwritten work, but also towards in some ways old-fashioned things with new technologies, like having real conversations. And I don't listen to their whole conversations, but that's not the point of it. It's for them to have a conversation, and then they have to show that they've prepared for it, and they have to reflect on it. Where they're quoting key parts of their conversation, which I don't think AI could easily pull out. I mean, they'd have to caption it, I guess, capture it. And so it'd be a more effort than it's worth, I think, for students. Maybe that's the driving principle, is making it harder than it's worth on assignments.
So Rebecca, I'm going to respond to 3 things you said. You said a lot of amazing things in there. First, can your students still handwrite?
Oh, it's
I'm
painful.
saying that facetiously because
yeah.
like my kids are 13 and 15. They hate to write, like actually with a pen. They hate to do that. They're not skilled at doing that. They would much rather take notes on an iPad or something like that. But
well,
so
it's not fun to grade either. So no.
The 2 other points I wanted to come back to is, it sounds like AI in your class is an amazing thing because it actually inspired you to do so much better, powerful teaching. So what happened is, whatever the inspiration was, your class is more awesome now. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things that you're doing in there that are like best practices in teaching, right? The active learning, the service learning, the community engagement, all of those sorts of things, the social skills you're building. That's fantastic. So I'm going to say that AI has a win for me now because it made your class so much better, just because you didn't want them to do it. The other thing you said in there was that, and a lot of people use this, use the AI to get the idea. And you said you want your students to think. I absolutely want our students to think, because it's the best thing about academia, is the ability to think, right? It's one of those things. I was having this conversation with my students the other day about the research process. And I said, my favorite part of the research process is right before data collection. Once data collection starts, I like the project so much less. Because at that point, it's just going through the motions, right? It's all right, now I'm collect the data, analyze the data, report the data. All the creativity, all the coolness is right before data are collected. And I don't want to deprive my students of that really cool thing. I love quotes, and I'll probably not get this quote exactly right, but I heard someone said, I don't want AI to do my writing so I have time for my laundry and my dishes. I want to do the writing so AI can do my laundry and dishes, right? So I want to do the best things, the coolest things, and then let the other things be mechanized that I'm not as excited about. So I don't want to deprive my students of the opportunity to come up with those awesome ideas either. So I just wanted to kind of say that you reached out to me in like 3 or 4 different ways in what you said. So thank you so much for that. Andy, your hand is up.
I wanted to comment on one of the other things that you just said, Rebecca, which was telling your students, not only that you want them to think, but that you're, you need to see that process so that it can inform your teaching. And I think that explicitly saying that to students is really helpful. I think that students need reasons to buy in, right? And so just saying like, don't use AI is not a reason to buy in, right? But by providing like, when you come up with these ideas yourself, this is what you're gaining. And not only for you personally, it helps me in figuring out how to teach this class well. And that goes back to benefiting you and the other students in this class, because the experience is going to be better. If I notice that with all these submissions, like, oh, my students have really missed out on some key idea, I'm going to make sure to teach towards that. Well, if they had all done it through AI, then maybe they didn't actually miss out on that key idea, or maybe there's like a bigger problem that you need to address first. So by having them do their work, it allows you to see what needs to be done. And that's something that I do a lot with my students, is talk about like, I need to see your errors, because that's how I can help you to improve. If you give me perfect work, there's nothing to do here. Right. And so I just wanted to say that's a really helpful thing to state explicitly to students so that they can buy into this idea of, okay, like maybe I shouldn't use AI.
Other thoughts on AI? I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. I don't know what I think anymore, but I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation.
I can tell you my least favorite thing about AI right now,
What do
and
you got?
that's that my son, who's in high school, has started using Google AI Assistant to answer his phone calls. And so when I call him, his phone goes, "Hi, this is Google AI Assistant. The caller would like to know if this call is urgent." And it makes me want to
Wow.
jump through the phone and throttle him.
Wow.
Like, I am your mother. Every call from me is urgent.
Wow.
So
So
AI
do you
is
call your
evolving in
kids? I only
ways.
text mine, so I don't know.
I call when I mostly just text. And so I call if it's like, I'm on my way to pick you up, or like
Mhm.
things that need a pretty immediate response. And then he's like, is this urgent? And half the time he's playing video games. I'm like, so yeah, AI has evolved in ways that I would have never imagined.
You know, it's fun. Our kids are going to be ahead of the curve on some of this stuff too, right? They're gonna know these things. Like when Zoom first came out, you know, I'll share two quick stories. One of my nieces had found a way to record herself paying attention. So she then put that on a loop. So she'd be in her classes, you know, paying attention, and then she'd go to write. But it was just on a loop, so she could go do other things, but her teachers thought that she was attending class. One of the other classes, this is before people were really good at AI and knew how to shut things down. My son, who I think was like 9 at the time, was in his gifted class. All the other students figured out they could screenshot my son's face, change their name to Liam Saucier. So then there were like 10 Liam Sauciers in the class, all with the same screenshotted face, and they're all dropping inappropriate words in the chat, but they're 9. So they're putting like butt, poop, you know, in the chat. And I remember my son come bust in a meeting and he's crying and he shows me his iPad. He's like, they think I'm saying all these things. And they're just in the chat was just Liam Saucier butt, Liam Saucier poop, Liam. And the teacher just had her, you know, her face in her hands, you know, kind of at that point. But they're going to figure out faster than we have the ability to kind of shut it down. And I think appealing to what they're actually in education for is what I'm going to try to do. And this is something I try to do in my teaching anyway, is to try to really kind of ramp up that intrinsic motivation. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for the grade. Do it for your learning and your personal and professional development. And I'm not going to convince every student of that. I completely acknowledge that. And as a student myself, I was a highly intelligent, dumbass slacker who didn't necessarily know it was good for me in those moments. So I probably made some bad decisions. And thank goodness we didn't have things like ChatGPT when I was a student. All right. So it's good to kind of understand that I'm going to try, and they might at some point realize it, but I'm not going to bat 1,000, right? There are going to be students I'm going to miss on, and I'm going to try to focus on the ones who are trying to do it right. And that keeps me happiest, it keeps me healthiest, and it makes the job that I'm doing as fulfilling as it can be.
That makes me think too, this is one of the things that I keep telling myself, is that cheating is not new. You know, everyone's freaking out about ChatGPT, and I'm like, but this is always, it's a different modality, but like this stuff has been happening forever. And again, I'm like, I'm gonna focus on teaching quality classes, offering quality educational opportunities. And then, you know, the students that want to cheat, they're going to cheat. If it's egregious, you know, if they've copied and pasted from Wikipedia and left the hyperlinks in, well, then I'm going to report that, because like, I'm just not going to let that slide. But otherwise, I'm like, I need to focus on my energy on the actual teaching.
I remind students that, you know, they're not just here for a grade. And it depends on what students you're working with and what level, but for a lot of them, they're here for a letter of recommendation. And that means I need to know who they actually are and what they can actually do. And when I write a letter of recommendation, I need to be able to speak very specifically about their skills. And so I have to be very sure that the work is coming from them. So they need to find a way to distinguish themselves. So it kind of maybe put some pressure back on them to make sure they don't look like AI. You know, so they need to get creative about, being their unique best, and so that I can see what that is when I'm making recommendations.
As we've made reference to the cheating aspect of AI a number of times, I'll remind you that Camilla Roberts is visiting this series next week, and she'll be presenting on honor integrity. She's the director of our honor and integrity system here at K-State. For those of you who saw her present in our series last year, she was surprisingly unconcerned about AI for exactly the reasons that Andy kind of talked about. She's like, this is the new calculator. It's like when the calculator came out, all the mathematicians were like, oh my God, our students aren't going to know how to do math. And then very quickly they said, now we can have them do harder math. So kind of find a way to leverage that tool to better learning. So I'm interested to see if Camilla's stance has changed at all. I suspect it probably hasn't, but I suspect she's been able to give us some really good guidance. And yes, 2 weeks from now, we'll have the AI Pedagogy and Curriculum 2.0 from Sydney Alexis and Teresa Merritt Cassidy, who are kind of our AI experts this year. They have kind of a grant to kind of help them learn about AI, to kind of expand all of our knowledge about using AI in teaching. So that'll happen here in 2 weeks. So we got some cool stuff coming up. I do want to kind of end it here because I want to make sure people get to their 1 o'clocks. This year, I'm trying to get us done by about 12:50 every week. I don't think I've been successful yet, but I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that you get other things going on. We get a post-event survey that's available for you in the chat. If you want to check that out, let us know how this event went for you today. But I look forward to seeing you next week. And I thank all of you for sharing some time with us today. As always, I feel so enriched by these conversations.